as well as at Grand Valley State University. And I've always had a desire to think about how we really help people take the knowledge piece that they're learning, but also to be able to apply it. And it's one of the things that draws me to the Competency-Based Education Network and the work that we're doing. So what Deb and I thought we would do is there are definitions all over the board with regard to what is competency-based education. And I know we're here today to talk about various tools that are available to help you as you're trying to build or scale your competency-based offerings. But we really always try to start a conversation with a solid definition. Deb and I, somebody from another state was texting us both today saying their definition is not very good. It's like we've got to go back to this definition. So it usually helps to just start with a definition to make sure everybody is on the same page. So before we can think about what competency-based education is, it's really important to first think about what a competency is. And so our definition is here. A competency is both the knowledge, the skill, and the ability and the intellectual behaviors one would need to be successful in a particular setting or in a situation, a career. So if you think about it, the knowledge is what does that person need to know? What are the theories? What are those big ideas that they need to truly understand? Then what is the application, or what does the application of that look like? What are the skills and the abilities they need to be able to have? How do they take that knowledge and do something with it? And then what are the dispositions that that person needs to display in order to be successful? So any good competency-based education combines both knowledge, skills and abilities, and intellectual behaviors in relation to a specific program of study. So what is it that somebody with a business degree or a engineering program or a liberal studies program need to know, be able to do, and how do they need to behave in order to be successful or to be competent? So that's how we define a competency. When we look at definitions, there is not a single definition for competency-based education. Certainly Sebenz has a definition that we have advanced, but if you look across the various definitions, they all contain these kind of characteristics, and so we wanted to just hit a couple of those and then we'll move on to a couple other distinctions in this work. It's about what an individual knows and can do. It's about making sure that they've mastered that content, right? So in competency-based education, one can't get by not knowing one competency because they're competent in another area, and when you average it together, they're able to pass. They must be able to master each individual competency. In some CBE programs, time is variable and learning is fixed. In all of them, learning should be fixed in the fact that we should make transparent what it is a person needs to know and be able to do, and that should not vary from learner to learner. But in some programs, we often, those are called direct assessment programs, those that eliminate the tethering to time and credit hour, and instead measure learning by actually the learning itself and not by time. That is a common definition element as well. All CBE programs have rigorous and transparent assessments that are really authentic, that mirror what it is a person would need to know and be able to do in a real world setting. CBE is truly focused on that student journey. What do we need to do to support this personalized learner, this individual, to move them from where they are today to where they need to be? We're agnostic as to the source of learning. So whether or not they got that through the National Guard, to James's background, or whether they got that at an institution or working and volunteering in a civic organization, as long as they can demonstrate that they know it and can do it, then we're more agnostic as to how or where that learning came from. And again, really thinking in a flexible, personalized manner. For some people, there's a distinction, or you hear the phrase competency-based learning. And Deb, maybe you could share with us kind of how we differentiate kind of competency-based learning from competency-based education.
Sure. I think that the key point here is that competency-based education we see as a subset of competency-based learning, really. That competency-based learning is a broader set of opportunities in which competencies become sort of, or at least begin to become currency in the educational space, so that these opportunities, they may be things, workplace educational experiences, apprenticeship experiences. We think of prior learning assessments as falling into this category, where the demonstration of learning still comes through competencies, but it's sort of one-off experiences in many ways. It's contrasted to competency-based education, which we see as a structured, intentionally designed opportunity that in which the competencies actually scaffold intentionally by design on each other to produce the competencies that are required for a very clear credential of some sort, a degree, a certificate, some sort of credential that requires demonstration of this explicitly articulated set of competencies, and the learning experience is backward designed from that set of competencies. So it's much more structured, much more intentionally designed than what we think of as competency-based learning. And it's becoming more and more important to make these distinctions, because more and more people are using the word competencies, which is, I think, a sign of positive growth and the success of our movement and our discussions. But we do mean different things if we're talking about apprenticeships or even military credit, as you see on this slide, versus an intentionally designed CBE program. And even within those programs, as this slide indicates, we would separate out the direct assessment programs from the non-direct assessment CBE programs. So those are just some terms to level set with, I think.
So Deb, I don't know if you want to keep going, or you want me to set this up?
You can set it up.
Great. So one of the things, the whole message of this webinar is around the tools that are available. And we continued since really 2013, when Sebenz first began, to get this question of what does a quality competency-based program look like? How is it different from a regular program? How do I know what quality is when I see it? And so it really became a mission early on for Sebenz to help work with its member institutions to define what quality is. So the first tool that we would really point you to is to Sebenz quality framework. I think they've used that framework through Texas A&M Commerce and sharing that out with other institutions in Texas and even further than that. But I would encourage you to take a look at our tool, because it does a pretty good job of being able to help you think about what would I need to do in order to build a quality program. These are the different kind of components that go into the quality framework. So there are 8 elements, and these 8 elements are kind of the shorthand for each of those quality dimensions. Underneath that element is kind of the fundamental proposition that really defines that element. So we call that a principle. So you've got an element and then a principle. Underneath the principle really sets what the standard is. What is that level of quality or attainment that we would be measuring people against? This is the standard of what we would expect. And I think one of the most helpful pieces of the quality framework for institutions is the performance indicator section that follows each of the 8 elements. So under each element, you will see a page or two, and some, I think assessment might have 3 pages of performance indicators, and it breaks it down by, are you at initial level of performance? Are you moving along? Are you really getting there? Or man, are you off the charts better than what we would expect to see? And that's all shorthand, obviously, but it does give you some kind of guidance as to how would I get started in building a program. So if you've not taken a look at the full quality framework, it's available on the website, and I would encourage you to take a look at Sebenz quality framework. Deb has been absolutely instrumental in writing, editing, revising, seeking feedback, listening to what folks said, making changes and edits, in making that quality framework really what it is today. So what we're going to do is just real fast run through those 8 elements, and then because it serves as the basis for our other tools, then we'll move to 2 other tools that we think you might be able to use as well. So I don't know which one of us wants to go first or second. Deb, you can shout it out if you want to do this one, or I can do the next one, or however.
Don't care. But I can go with this since you've done a great job. So the first one is demonstrated institutional commitment to and capacity for CBE innovation. We put this first because we really do believe that CBE programs have to be something that the entire institution supports and is engaged in. It touches the entire institution, as those of you who've done them have realized, everything from the registrar's office to scheduling offices, let alone faculty and curricular design people, are impacted by this decision. And it needs to be clear to everyone that you're going to stick with this change, because this is a change that is tough. It also needs to be clear to everyone that this is sort of a long game. That's not going to instantly bring in additional huge amounts of revenue for your institution, but it will as you turn the corners and as you start to scale these programs. So people need to understand the long picture and the change implications and understand the rationale from it. And it needs to come both from the top and from sort of the more grassroots parts of the organization. So the standards talk through things like that in this one, and the performance indicators. So we'll probably move to the next one because we have to move quickly or we could talk forever.
Can you see the clear and measurable?
Yep.
So every program is really based on clear, measurable, meaningful, and integrated competencies. 4 words, couldn't decide which one all 4 has to stay because they all convey a different message. But behind every program is a set of well-articulated competencies. What is it that a person needs to know, be able to do, and the intellectual behaviors that will be needed? Are they clear? Can you measure them? Are they meaningful? Do they matter to somebody? Not just to the faculty who created them, but are they going to be valued in the work environment? Are they integrated, meaning do they cut across the entire curriculum? Are they both kind of specialized and cross-cutting? Do we have the right kind of blend of competencies? So that's one. Coherent program design, you want that one? I'll take it. So coherent program and curriculum design, again, does it all fit together? Did we sit down and think, if this is the credential, what is it that they need? Did we backwards design it to make sure that we've gotten to where we need to be? Do things build on, sequence, and scaffold the way that they should in a curriculum? So this one's really thinking about, does it all fit together well? So for some folks, they believe you can do competency-based education a course at a time. We would say you need to be able to look at it from a programmatic level and say, what is it that this full credential needs? And it isn't as much a course by course by course, but really across that full program level. There you go.
So credential level assessment strategy with robust implementation. The point here is that once you've got the competencies defined, you've got to decide how you're going to assess whether people are demonstrating those competencies. And that ought to also be in a backward design sort of manner, and has to align with, of course, the design you've just built for the competencies. So we talk in this section about assessment for learning as well as assessment of learning. So assessment that's used to inform a student about where the gaps in their competencies are and what they need to do, as well as ones that are meant to really validate the mastery of the competency. We also like to talk about authentic assessments. So in that manner, we're thinking of using designing assessments so that they approximate as closely as possible the way in which that competency would be demonstrated in the rest of the world. So, and by robust implementation, we really mean you can do psychometrics on those assessments. So yeah, I think we can move forward.
Sorry about that.
No problem. I can do intentionally designed and engaged learner experience too, since we're maybe is smoother. So with intentionally designed and engaged learner experience, what we're talking about here is that as you design the competencies and the assessments, you then have to come along and say, how do we make sure every student that it can possibly be successful in this program is successful? How do we know how they're progressing? How do we use data to just in time and just at the right moment enter in and support them? How do we make sure our faculty and staff understand their roles and are invested in the support and success of each student? And how do we offer this full array of sort of wraparound services so that the students understand their pathway, understand how to get their needs met, and feel like they're never alone in the journey?
Well, we think it's also absolutely essential that CBE programs engage external partners. So these are not created in isolation on a college campus, but instead we have external partners that are breathing into that program. These could be industry organizations, trade associations, it could be specific employers, where at the very beginning, before you have a program designed, you're sitting down and saying, what are your needs? What is it that you value? What are the competencies that a person needs? And they are truly an instrumental partner. So in this section, it talks a lot about how do we continue to work together? Is it a two-way partnership where the employer is breathing into the program and those competencies, the assessments, the learners, and also the faculty is sharing back out with their external partners as well? So what does that engagement look like from an external partner standpoint? The next one has to do with the transparency of student learning, making sure that we are making it clear to others what it is that that learner knows and can do. So we often see grouped into this section, how are we handling our transcripting process? But it's also as much about, does a learner know what it is that they need to still master? Can they articulate that, define that? Can an external partner be able to see it and understand it as well? So the comprehensive student learner record project, those kinds of elements fall under that transparency of student learning element. The last one really is evidence-driven continuous improvement process, which if you're going to design a program, you sure want to know it's delivering on the promises, right? So if you say we're doing CBE because we would like for people to go as fast or as slow as they need to go, are you monitoring that? How are you monitoring that? Where are you collecting data? Where are you reporting out and sharing that data? Carlos is one of the best at really collecting data and reporting out how well the Texas A&M commerce programs are doing. So we want to make sure that as you're designing and building a program, you're thinking always about how will I continually evaluate the program to make sure that it's in good shape and it's going to do the kinds of things that we are promising a learner that it can do, that the learner is truly seeing the benefits of that academic process. So we had the quality framework built, And once the quality framework was released, we found a lot of folks saying, help me use it. I don't know, I'm not sure exactly. It's so overwhelming. Help me get started in it. And we were hearing that kind of feedback. We were also hearing feedback about it's really hard for us to tell the CBE story at our campus in a way that makes sense to our faculty or makes sense to our external partners or to our board of trustees. And so those were continual kind of requests that Sebenz was getting from its membership and from the field at large saying, help us with these kinds of things. So Sebenz really created a collaboratory, and in that collaboratory, we really were striving to deepen and extend kind of Sebenz's founding commitment to collaborative work. So if you've ever been to a Sebenz convening, they're really about building new field-facing outputs that will help the field embrace, build, scale CBE programs. And so we wanted to really create some time-bound field advancing projects that would help institutions accelerate their CBE progress. And so through the collaboratory, we are hoping to not only raise Sebenz's profile and certainly that of our members as leaders in the field, but to really produce more tools that can help you. You probably have seen, obviously, in the intro to this call as well, that we've released 2 new tools this year, in January of this year, and those are tools that are coming out of that collaboratory project. Our big goal is to make sure we're helping institutions grow their demand for programs, that we're helping them build their capacity to be able to do CBE work, and that where possible, we're removing the barriers that exist at federal and state levels that is inhibiting the wider scale and use maybe of CBE programs. So that's kind of what we're looking to do. So the first 2 collaboratory projects was to say, how do we help institutions take this quality framework and begin to adopt it? We wanted to build field capacity, and we've done that in the user's guide, which we'll share with you here momentarily. So that user's guide was really designed to say, okay, I've got this quality framework, now I've got a user's guide that's going to help me walk through it. And the second one was we wanted to help grow demand by helping institutions do a better job of telling their stories. So I've put in this slide deck kind of a listing of collaboratory members. And when you look at it, there's about 20 folks that worked on the user's guide from a range of institutions as well as vendors in this mix, who have rolled up their sleeves, dedicated the time to really try to create a resource that you're going to find helpful and useful to you as you design your program. In this next slide, you see the folks from the storytelling collaboratory. These are folks that, again, have helped to write a document, vet a document that really is designed to help build your capacity to really tell better stories and allow more people to be attracted to your program. So that's the kind of teams behind the work. So Deb, if you could, why don't you set up the quality framework user's guide that was created?
Sure, absolutely. And this is a photo of the working team. It looks like we had like a vacation. We were mostly in these beautiful rooms, but inside, hard working group. Pulling things together, but that's the group of folks. So as Charla already said, we put out the framework and people began using it, but people began raising some questions about consistent application of it. And so the membership really said, how do we pull together some guidelines about how to use this framework? What, basically the framework just gets plopped out there. None of its story, its narrative, its context is missing. So how do we frame it up, and how do we help people understand who should use it, when they should use it, and how to start digging in? So that's what the work of the group did. And the group tackled each of these questions. Why are we talking about quality, and why now? And Charla already mentioned most of this, but the key points are, as we try to influence policy at a federal level, at a state level, even at a local level, we would often run into the question, well, what about how will we know when it's a good program? Of course, the people we're talking to, are telling us your program is good, but how would we know if a program wasn't good? And it was a fair question to ask. So the framework was developed. It's super important still, as we're in this time right now where the HEA, the Higher Ed Authorization Bill, is, will at some point get reauthorized. There is ongoing discussion at the federal level for sure about what changes might we want to make to allow for innovation, to support things like CBE more effectively. And if some of that work were to go forward, it would be critical that we understood that we were able to help policymakers and regulators understand what a good CBE program would look like versus one that we didn't think was quality. We tried to develop all of this and be agnostic as to the kind of program it is, like what's its discipline, the kind of institution that was offering the program. Is it a community college? Is it an R1? We tried to be agnostic as to whether it was delivered face-to-face or online or some sort of hybrid model. So there was a degree level. Is it an AA or is it a master's degree? All of those things should fit for the framework, but we wanted to be able to explain that to people. So the team went in, and you can see in some of the next slides, I think, an example of what the team worked with is they asked for each of the elements, they asked who should be at the table when you talk about this element. So for demonstrated institutional commitment to and capacity for CBE, who needs to be there? What resources are really needed to drive this particular element forward? Then we developed, we started to develop some vignettes, and this is where we overlap with the storytelling group as well. We need some additional actual vignettes from the field. So most of what's in this version of the user's guide is actually sort of, I don't know, historical fiction, like some conglomerate of some institutions that have dealt with things, but they're not actual case studies yet. We're still looking for more of those. And then, what is the key question that people should be paying attention to here? And where should people be starting when they are looking at this element? What's the central starting place that people have to be paying attention to? And then the pro tips category. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see the work that the groups actually did. It's thought of, this is what the working groups would come up with. They'd take stickers and they'd answer those questions and they'd move things around and they'd struggle back and forth, and lots of great discussion, lots of work, which we then distilled. In the next slide, you start to see this person had like the most impeccable handwriting ever, right? I don't know who this was, but that's actually someone's handwriting. But we did distill things, and then we put it all together in the current version that is accessible, right, Charla?
Yep, so you can go to Sebenz website, so cbenetwork.org, and click on the resources tab, and you just scroll down and you can find the user's guide right there. It's free and available to you. It's got all of the information filled in a more presentable manner than what you see here. So it gives you the opportunity to actually take it and begin to use it. So it's printable, it's in a PDF form, and so feel free to certainly go online and grab that. The second tool that we would like to encourage you to think about using is called the Cbe Story. It's a storytelling toolkit. And again, in this project, what happened was we had been doing quite a bit of extensive work with Sebenz at Sebenz convenings on storytelling, and had brought in a number of people, Andy Goodman, Allison Cadlack from Public Agenda, and a host of others who are good at telling stories. Roger Harvey comes to mind. A group of people who are good at storytelling to say, help us think about how we communicate the CBE story. And so in the storytelling toolkit, it's got a section on how to share your vision for your program, why it is that you would be doing this, how do you better communicate your results or change the conversation. And then it begins to talk about the power of storytelling and why it matters and what are the elements that make up a good story. And then there is a section for all the different audiences that you need to tell a story to. When you're speaking to a policymaker, the way you talk about CBE is different than you would if you were talking to a student, for example. The facts are all true. It's what you choose to feature in that story that would change. So there's different sections for each of the audiences that you would be speaking to, and it gives you a way to do some activities and really dig in and think about how you would tell your story. And then in addition to that, it's really important to help others tell their stories. So listening to students and figuring out what are student needs, helping them better articulate how a CBE program helped them. The same thing with faculty and staff. When we've spoken to faculty and staff that support a CBE program, they really talk about their deep relationships or their engagement with learners. They talk about helping learners that have been not well served previously by higher ed. And so we want to be able to pull those stories out of our students, out of our faculty and our staff as well. And then all good stories appeal to both the heart and the head. And so you need both the heart-tugging stories, but you also need some data to prove that what you're saying is actually true. So there's a section around how do you get data and evidence that's going to help bring your story to life. And then kind of a request that as you collect these stories, share them, because this way to share stories can be very empowering. So if you look at, these are pages from kind of the storytelling book, as you look at it, there are tips, there are activities, there are places where you can fill in stuff, you can work through it with a team if you wanted to do that. There are actual tools and worksheets and all that kind of stuff that one could use in order to help you better frame your core message, to think about, are you covering all the elements of an effective story? So this resource is also out there and available for your use. And you'll see towards the end, we ask you to share your story. And so the collaboratory has actually launched, Sebenz actually launched a digital storytelling contest. So I don't know if you saw this come out, but we're trying to incentivize institutions, vendors, to tell us their story. Tell us about how CBE is working. And so we're asking folks to take a combination of photos and videos and music and animation and voiceover and put together a digital story that highlights your work, somewhere in that 2 to 4 minute length. You have an opportunity to turn that in by August 1, and then we're going to actually be awarding cash prizes for the best story videos, digital videos that we get. We'll pay that money out to an institution or an individual, however, or whomever actually submits it into the storytelling contest. Those digital stories will be featured at CBE Exchange, which is our big annual conference. But in addition to that, we'll go into a storytelling data bank, if you want to, like a story bank, where you could go in and actually search for stories that would help you better articulate what it is that you were hoping to do at your institution as well. So a lot of cool stuff that can come if institutions will really send in their stories. So I encourage you to take a look at our website, cbenetwork.org. When you click on the resource library, you'll see a number of resources that are out there, from toolkits you can use with your financial aid team to your IT staff, reports on how faculty perceive CBE, all the way through the tools that we reference, the quality framework, the user's guide, and also the storytelling toolkit. So encourage you to go to the website and grab those off, print them out, and use them, and then let us know how it goes. That would also be really helpful. And before we open it for questions, because we have the mic, I want to do a commercial because that's the way, I guess that's the privilege you get. But we really, as we shared earlier, Sebenz really committed to trying to help grow the demand for CBE programs, to build institutional capacity, to be able to really build scale, high quality competency-based education programs and credentials, and to think about how we can help institutions in the field at large remove the barriers that inhibit the work. And so those are really our priorities as an organization. We would love to have as many institutions that are working in this space to be part of what we do at CBEN. This is really a different kind of organization. It's a very collaborative group of folks who work well together to try to help build field-facing resources that can help us all. So there's different levels of membership within CBEN, but we'd certainly love for you or your institution or your organization to consider being a part of that. You can learn more on our website as well. The other plug I would put in is for our CBE Exchange Conference. I'm sure if you're looking at this space, working in this space, you've either been to CBE Exchange or hopefully you're thinking about it. This year, September 25th, technically, the CBEN convening is on the 24th, but the 25th through the 27th at the Yacht and Beach Club Resorts in Orlando, Florida, there at Disney, we'll be holding CBE Exchange. Registration is open. Hotel room blocks are open, and you can learn more about that at the cbeexchange.org website. I think we're days away from having the full program posted, but wanted to at least put a plug in. I know at this moment, we will launch the Story Bank and make that public at CBE Exchange. We have a national survey that's being conducted by AIR, and they'll be releasing their initial findings from that national survey on the state of competency-based education in the U.S. So there are a number of significant resources that'll be released at CBE Exchange. It's the place really to go and skill up in this area and develop the competencies that we all need in order to do CBE well. So I hope you'll choose to join us at CBE Exchange. I'm going to leave this up as we move to questions and answers, but if you have questions, you want to figure out more about membership or more about CBE Exchange or what have you, that's my contact information, including my cell phone. So you're welcome to reach out at any time. And with that, I probably would suggest, James, if you've got questions that have come in that the two of us could field some of those questions, we'd be delighted to do that.
Perfect. Okay, so here are a couple of questions that we've got real quick, and I'm unmuting everyone so that they can talk. So make sure that if you are not on mute on your end, you go ahead and do so. That way everyone will have a chance to speak. But the very first question is what are some of the national challenges around CBE?
National challenges?
You mean there are national challenges? No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I mean, I think I'll take a stab and Charla will clean up after me, but just as a reminder, people who are not on mute, it's great if you went on mute, because maybe you're wandering around and things, so thank you. So we know that there's a large, no, if you want to put everyone back.
Yeah, I think if you would remute people, that would be really helpful, and maybe they just use the question box on the side.
That's exactly what I'm going to do, ladies.
Thank you. So from a national or federal perspective, there are probably a few big buckets of challenge, and one is really the federal policy landscape, and then there's also probably this larger issue of, I'm going to say, a national understanding or misinformation about what CBE is. But from a federal policy perspective, there's, again, two big buckets of work, and we can easily break this into many sub-bullets. But I would say the two big buckets of work are really to make sure that any legislation and or regulation or even rulemaking understands the implications of the actions that they might take vis-a-vis competency-based education. And so it's a continuous effort to educate people about what's the difference between competency-based education and maybe competency-based learning, because there are different concerns and regulations in each of those categories. So one big push is to make sure that nothing does harm and sets us back. And another big push is to make sure that we don't sort of free up the regulation to a point that really some players could come into the space. It would become appealing to come into the space and build a cheap and dirty program, and that risk would really harm all of us, because we would end up with sort of a reputational problem in terms of what CBE is or isn't, and that could set the field back. So it's finding this sweet spot where people understand what a high quality program is, and that's why we think these stories, this collection of these stories, this user's guide, and then the framework itself can help people be a little more crisp to understand when they're really talking about CBE versus CBL, which has some things to offer, but we don't want to be confused when it comes to policy. So I guess what I'm saying here is there's a big federal policy issue. There's a big national reputation issue. And then at that same, in a way, this is not going to sound like a national issue anymore, but it's a national issue because if we take a big picture view of the things, there are lots of state policies that are challenging for folks who are trying to implement CBE in the states. And so some states have active policies that are concerning. Sometimes it's not simple, but it's very complex. But it's issues like the funding formula for the state-funded institutions that can be challenges. So I don't know if I was getting at the question or not.
I think that was great. I honestly don't have anything to add there. I think the reputational piece can't be underscored. You probably experience that on your own campuses, right? Where faculty don't understand exactly what it is, and it feels quote unquote academic light to certain faculties, and part of that is just not understanding yet what it is and what it isn't. And so I think that is a national challenge as we continue to tell the CBE story, that we're doing it in a way that's relatively consistent and focuses on a truly high quality faculty enhanced academic experience that requires mastery of all those competencies and individual needs. So helping communicate about what CBE is in a way in which we can be myth busting, I think is a national challenge.
Awesome. All right, thank you for that answer. We really appreciate it. One of the things that came up was also just language and definitions as a basic challenge, which is, I think, has been reiterated as well. So from a second question, I thought this was a really good one. Do you see grassroots growth from public secondary schools? And if so, is the growth greater in some regions than others concerning CBE?
You mean to take a stab at that first? So I would say absolutely. We do see secondary institutions, K through 12 systems that are moving to, and what they may call it is mastery-based or proficiency-based or even personalized learning approaches. When you drill down into what that means, there's a lot of similar parallels to what's happening in higher education and in that space. And so, yes, I do think there is a pretty solid amount of activity happening in the secondary levels. In some ways, it may even be more advanced in some places than it is in the higher ed space. And those secondary institutions are actually driving higher ed innovation. Because the secondary schools are already kind of ahead of post-secondary, and so depending on where you live, that is a true statement, that you do see a lot of innovation within the secondary space. I think of, Chris Sturgis and her great work with Competency Works on that K through 12 space, but there are also funders and other organizations that are helping to support this proficiency-based or mastery-based learning environment that's more personalized in the K through 12 space. That would be my thought on that. Deb, other thoughts?
I think that's right. I mean, if we're talking the K-12 space, we do see a lot of that happening in like Maine, for example, New Hampshire, for example. So there's a lot of work in some of the states on the West Coast as well. And I think it's really having an impact on what people expect to see when they get into their post-secondary experience as well. So I don't have much more than that to add, but I think it's a great call.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was one of the points that even came up on this campus not too long ago. As most of the time when we're talking about CBE here on Texas A&M Commerce, we're talking about adult eds, but we have students who are coming and they're right out of high school in some instances, and of course, in some instances they're being homeschooled, and they are wanting as a request for competency-based programs. And so we're seeing that being driven at that local level. Well, I don't have another question, but I do have a point from Brooks, who's on the call, and he states the quality standards can definitely help with any reputational and buy-in issues. Another great use. And so I just wanted to make sure that I gave him a shout out. He's done so much work with CBE and Sebenz as well, and I really appreciate having had an opportunity to work with him. And so that's really the questions that we have at this time. So ladies, do y'all want to give a final plug about Sebenz or any of that at this point?
Well, I'd give a plug for Brooks and the great work that's happening up at Rasmussen, and I know his enrollments are growing, and he's worked hard to build a good quality program and to be a good player in this field. He's worked on the user's guide and has done a great job there. So shout out to Brooks, and thanks for your comment on that. Just that you guys are welcome to reach out. We would love to see you at CB Exchange. If there's something that CBank can do to help support you or some need that you might have, feel free to email me. The email is up on your screen right now, and either Deb, myself, or someone on the staff would be happy to chat with you about how we can support you. And then as you use the quality framework, as you use the user's guide or the storytelling toolkit, we'd love your feedback. We view all of these tools as an iterative process. We don't think we have it perfect yet. We think we have a great solid start to it, and through application I think it'll begin to continue to refine those tools. So we really do encourage you to share feedback, what works, what doesn't work, and then what else do you need. Tell us what are the resources that would be helpful to you, and let us go about trying to create those. Let us see if we can find a collaboratory project that can help with that.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Long, Dr. Bushway, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate you coming on here and giving us this type of information at such a high level, and we appreciate your service to the academic industry as a whole concerning competency-based education.
Thanks for having us. It's
Absolutely.
a great opportunity. Hopefully it was useful.
Absolutely. Well, with that, we're going to end the webinar, and thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.